Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It's 8:30 in the morning, East Coast time. It is Monday, October 21st, a day before the NBA regular season. I'm so excited. A day before the NBA regular season kicks off. We got a two-game slate to kick it off. We have the LA match between the Clippers and the Lakers. No Paul George will be there. We'll get into all that. We have New Orleans and a totally new revamped team. And then Toronto coming off a championship win, but a pretty big letdown losing the guy who pretty much got you that chip in Kawhi Leonard. Just signed Pascal Siakam to the max, as they probably should have. Siakam, absolutely an underrated player in this league. So before we get into all the DFS stuff, I just want to break down what this is going to be on this channel for NBA, especially during the NFL overlap. Well, first, if you're new, welcome. My name is Sal Vetri. I do cover DFS in the NFL, NBA, WNBA, and NBA streets. This will only be a video format for now. I do have a podcast, but that's mainly going to be my NFL type videos from the week. There's a decent chance you're just discovering me because you only like the NBA and you don't really look up NFL DFS content or something like that. I did cover NBA last year. The channel has boomed and really grown a ton during the NFL season, so I appreciate all the subscriber support. If you get any value from this video, and I'm about to tell you how this segment is going to be, and hopefully a daily basis, if you could hit the subscribe button, it helps me out a ton. About to hit 13,000 subscribers, helps me grow and reach new people with this, what I hope is beneficial information. So, the way that we did it last year is the way I'm going to do it this year, unless something changes, and really I like the way that it flowed. We're going to update you on injuries, and in the NBA we know injuries are huge. Most big slates of maybe 10 games are going to have like 15 things that you need to be updated on injuries. Like each team is going to have an injury of some sort, most likely more times than not, that will impact some sort of rotation. If it's not the starters, then at least those secondary unit minutes, instead of a guy playing only 12 minutes, well, he's playing 20 now, and he might be viable if he's a good point per minute producer, things like that. And then what I do is I get into the target offense sheet. The target offense sheet just takes a look at pace and Vegas odds, which is very important for not only calculating projections, but just kind of getting an idea for how fast the teams are going to play and where the best fantasy points are, or at least the potential for those fantasy points on a given night. We'll take a look at some other things as well, not just the matchups, but defense versus position. We'll be looking at last year's data, which isn't a very good data sample because we know the NBA's turnover and how these teams switch up and players traded and signing in free agency every year. It shuffles the whole league, but we don't have any data moving forward, so it's just something as a placeholder right now. And then the early interest, which is what everybody really wants to be here for, the quote-unquote picks, right? I'm going to give you early interest. I will have projections out on Patreon for the NBA. I'm deciding if I want to just start that in November. Patreon will charge you at the beginning of a month and up front, but I can prorate anybody. So if you want the projections, I will probably release them for the two-game slate, so you can get them on Patreon. And then I'll also be doing cash game tiers more days than not, probably 5 days a week during the NFL season, and then every day once the NFL season's over come January when it's playoffs. So early interest will just be a list of around 10 to 15 players, maybe only like 6 to 8, depending on the slate size. This being a two-game slate, I actually have a decent amount of early interest, like 10 that I want to discuss. And yeah, this video every single day is probably going to be around a 15-minute video or so. If it's a bigger slate, maybe a little bit more. But my goal is to get videos out every single day for the NBA. Now, what goes on in the background of my work for NFL, and then obviously NBA as well, it might be difficult during the NFL season to get videos out every single day. But I will be trying to get a daily video out. It might take getting up at 3 in the morning instead of 4:30 in the morning, but that's my goal, is to get them out and build momentum as we go into the NBA only season, really come January, come February, once the NFL ends and there's really nothing else going on besides PGA. I love NBA. NBA DFS is my favorite DFS. If you have not yet played and you found me from NFL or something else, you're going to love NBA DFS. Now, you have to critically pay attention because injuries will shift the whole slate. If you think you have everything set up 30 minutes before lock, 45 minutes before lock, and they changed it to a new rule. Now they have to report injuries 30 minutes before lock. We'll see how stern that rule is. No pun intended. Oh, look at that one. But yeah, if you think that you're set an hour before lock, one injury changes the whole slate in terms of value, in terms of what you can fit into your lineup. You will lose almost every single night if you don't look at injuries right before lock and there so after. So it's very demanding from that sense. Hopefully this new rule will help us out. But without further ado, let's just get into this slate. Again, I really appreciate it if you can check in the description down below. You can follow me on my social medias, Patreon exclusive content, NFL, and now NBA will be up there as well. So you can check that out if you wish. I'll release the NBA tier after this video, and you guys can check it out if you're interested. There will be projections daily, and then cash game tiers at least 5 days a week, potentially all 7 days, depending on what my NFL schedule looks like. Mondays and Thursdays are usually a little rough for NFL due to the showdown slates. So With that said, thank you all so much. Hit the subscribe button if you get any value from this video. Let's get into it. So injuries. I'm just going to name the key ones. Like, look, we don't really know rotations. So getting into the season, we don't know what these rotations, these new teams are going to look like. Beat writers can tell us. We get sort of a sense from the preseason, but we don't know for a fact. So we don't know if somebody's going to play 0 minutes or 6 minutes, and that does impact things, right? Those 6 minutes can go to players like a LeBron James, and he loses 2 now, or just players, whatever it might be, right? We don't know the load management. Kawhi says he doesn't want to be as much on his load management as he was last year, resting, but he still wants to be. And instead of resting 30 games, if he rests 15, that's still important, and that probably means he sees a reduction in his minutes per game. We need a couple of weeks of a sample from an NBA to feel confident about that. We can still project things, but we're projecting it based on assumptions instead of projecting it based on what we have seen for a 2 to 4 week sample, right? So just always keep that in mind when you're trying to look at projections from other sites, whether they're mine or whatever. Just know that it's very assumptions-based moving forward. Beat writers is what we're seeing in the preseason to an extent, but at the end of the day, you don't know if somebody's going to play 12 minutes as the backup center or 0 minutes and they go somewhere else with it, right? That's something that we need to find out over the first month of the season, and don't get frustrated with it. Just stick to it. So Kyle Kuzma, he got ruled out, I believe, yesterday or 2 days ago with a foot injury. That's definitely going to be impactful. He was actually a beneficial price point, but now with AD there, right, with LeBron and all these other pieces that they added around, Kuzma becomes almost an afterthought, right? Maybe a 6th man of the year type guy off the bench, but we'll see once he's healthy. Paul George is not going to be playing for a couple of weeks with that shoulder surgery that he got over the summer. Obviously makes it a very much so Kawhi's team until then, instead of somewhat of a split. Darius Miller was ruled out at the flat min. Don't think he was going to play a ton of minutes. He was playing a lot of minutes last year when New Orleans was dealing with a ton of injuries, but regardless, it's worth mentioning as a guy who maybe was going to see 8 minutes in this game. And then Zion Williamson, the rookie, the guy everybody's been waiting for, the next LeBron James, whatever you want to call Zion Williamson. Some people calling him some other things, relating him to some other players in the league that are not nearly as good, but we won't say that. I think the kid has a lot of talent, but unfortunately in the preseason gets a knee injury. Now he's going to miss a couple weeks. Waited all year for this, and now the guy's still not going to be there. So hopefully he gets healthy. But these are the injuries. In terms of impacted players, I'll be updating those as the season goes on next to the injuries. But for right now, again, it's the beginning of the year. I could tell you that Paul George out impacts Kawhi, and it'll impact to an extent Montrezl Harrell and an impact to an extent, Landry Shamet, like these guys, but I don't think it's important to be doing that just yet until we have a certain idea and a more solidified idea of what these 10-man rotations were going to look like, right? Because right now we have on most of these teams 9, 10-man rotations that we have to try and project for, but for the most part, there's like 12 guys who can get in those rotations, so we'll see who are the odd men out come the next couple of weeks and especially after week 1. The target offense sheet, the sheet that people loved last year, the target offense sheet. You can take a screenshot if you want. I will have this available along with the projections on Patreon. Target offense sheet. What do you have here is teams versus their opponents. Are they on a back-to-back, yes or no? Obviously, no. This is the first game of the season, the time that they play. The team pace from last year, that's clearly going to change. New coaches, new players in the team to run or to go slower if you want to play more defensive and slow the game down. The NBA in general over the last really 2 years has just shot up in terms of how fast they're playing. All sports really have done this. The NFL is playing at a higher pace. WNBA is playing at a higher pace. It's just the thing to do. When you push and you keep up, it's just at that point which team has more endurance and has more overall talent, especially in fast breaks. So what you're seeing here is just a team pace from last year. P pace is just projected pace for the game. It's going to be a very fast-paced game in both of these just because these teams, at least New Orleans, the Clippers, and LA, the Lakers, and the Clippers, all those 3 out of 4 teams, they were some of the highest-paced teams in the league. All 3 of those guys were in the teams were in the top 10 last year, a couple of them in the top 5. So look for those teams to be extremely high-paced. Sacramento is up there as well. Then you have the Vegas odds, just the spread, the over-under, game total. Obviously very important to see where the most points are going to be coming from. And then defense versus position for 2018. These are the stats. You can see how bad New Orleans was across the board. Now they lose Anthony Davis. They lose a couple of other players. They bring in some people, but I don't think it's going to be enough for the amount of guys that they lost. And really who they kept is not going to be defensive focus. Obviously, injury to Zion Williamson. What they did bring in, though, was a very good defensive center in Derek Favors, and we'll get into that. So that'll definitely cure a little bit their trouble at defending centers. One of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the league last year, right there with the Nets, right there even with the Lakers at defending centers. But we'll get into all that. Do not go, and I'm telling you right now, do not go off of this sheet that you're seeing right here for defense versus position wholly. Get an idea for it, understand who they brought in, who they lost, and how it's going to impact these numbers for them, because do not go off of it. The fact that they were really bad last year in New Orleans against centers, it does make it an okay spot for Marc Gasol, and we'll get into that because of his price point for Toronto. But it just doesn't make it the same type of smash spot because New Orleans did bring in players like Derek Favors, who's a huge upgrade from the players that were there before him playing at center, like Christian Wood at points last year and Jahlil Okafor and those types of players. So Big upgrades there for sure. And there's a lot of injuries to New Orleans, which impacted that. But also when you play at a faster pace, it's just going to lead to more fantasy points against you naturally because there's more plays in the game. So that was a big reason why New Orleans, not only just bad defensive players, but also playing at a pace up. So that said, I think this is an interesting spot to go to. I think that this is going to be a very beneficial sheet come a week or two once we get a sample, because right now I'm using 2018 data for pretty much everything except the Vegas odds. But this is the target offense sheet. This is what we'll be seeing. And now, finally, the early interest. So I know this is a very big introduction, but I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page for how my NBA schedule will be. Early interest. Look, I'll have interest, and this is subject to change by the time the game starts tomorrow night. I'm doing this literally 36 hours before, so I'll have interest in other players. Things will change. We'll get more, maybe, hopefully, news on what the rotations look like. Some players being active and inactive 30 minutes before lock if they stick to that. Anthony Davis, this is filtered by price point. You can see I have my projected points blocked out. Again, those will be on Patreon. Value, I just have a couple showing just to kind of show you what that means. Value is just point per dollar value. I don't think you should be sticking to it wholly. Everybody in the NBA loves to go, oh, my guy 5x'd. Yeah, well, he was $3,500 and he got you 18 points and he lost in the tournament. So why does it matter, right? It's all relative. Value is good relative to the other people in their price range or at their position to show you who's on their price. But at the end of the day, you need them to score points. So them 5 or 6xing for you at 18 fantasy points at $3,000 probably not going to do anything for you, to be honest with you. Anthony Davis at 10,200. This seems to be his team. LeBron seems to be very willing to take a back seat in the preseason and all through camp and let Anthony Davis be the featured guy. Now, we know LeBron is a guy who loves to play off of players anyways, assists up there and assists almost every single season, a guy who's really good off the ball. So, yeah, the obvious concern here is that LeBron and AD clash enough so that their price points are too much, the 10,200. I think it's still fine for AD, who seems to be over his hand or thumb, whatever it was, injury. 10,200 is interesting to me. And again, these are early interests. It doesn't mean I have interest in all of them to play them. Something about them is interesting. I think this is Anthony Davis's team. Obviously, everybody knows LeBron James has been a Laker, and he is, quote-unquote, the GOAT compared to him and Michael Jordan, whatever you want to say about LeBron James. It seems like this is a team that wants to play through Anthony Davis primarily. Pascal Siakam's too cheap. Just gets this extension. There's now no Kawhi Leonard. Last year when there was no Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam benefited by far the most. Serge Ibaka to an extent. Pascal Siakam at 7,600. It's just the wrong price point. It's a very wrong price point. Now, he might have a tough matchup against Derek Favors when he's in there banging around for parts of the game, but this is too cheap of a price point for Pascal Siakam. They messed up. I'm a huge Pascal Siakam fan and truther. Obviously, Giannis is a unicorn, but I think Pascal Siakam is the closest thing to Giannis, not in terms of his skill set, don't get carried away, just in terms of like his build and the way he plays the game on both sides of the floor. Siakam at 7,600 is probably $1,000 too cheap. Lou Williams at 6,500, so you would assume here that Lou Williams gets a little bump up from Paul George being out just in terms of scoring. Lou Williams, though, still probably going to come off the bench and not going to be needed as much once Paul George comes back. So if you want to keep Lou Will happy, you might want to let him take a couple more shots in a beneficial matchup against the Lakers. I think he's decent at 6,500. I think I prefer going just cheaper at point guard, but I think he's in a nice spot for what his ceiling is. Brandon Ingram, 5,800. He's going to be in play for huge minutes. He's going to play some 4 minutes. Now, he didn't play very good in the preseason at the 4, but expect Brandon Ingram to play 4 minutes at 5,800 for a guy who's going to play the 3 in the floor. And the reason you like him to play the 4 more is he's closer to the basket. Centers and power forwards and point guards, but centers and power forwards get a ton of opportunities closer to the basket for blocks, easier rebounds, easier points, and ones, things like that. That's where you want the points. Centers score the most points in DFS basketball. Marc Gasol, 5,500, a center. Bing, bing, bing. He's going to be going up against New Orleans. He actually has a tough matchup against Derek Favors, but this matchup is his price point's still too cheap if you project Marc Gasol, which I'm going to from somewhere around 26 to 28 minutes. That then leaves you with Serge Ibaka if you consider that they'll only be splitting minutes up, not playing together. Serge Ibaka somewhere between 20 and 22. Marc Gasol, if you get him closer to 26, closer to 28, 5,500 is a nice price point. Center only, so you can't put him in a power forward spot, but I think it's a nice price point for the matchup. Lonzo Ball, really good spot. Lonzo Ball's he's healthy. It seems like he's going to play 32 minutes, if not 32 to 34 minutes at 5,400 against Toronto. The only reason you don't want Lonzo Ball here is because the matchup is pretty brutal. This Toronto defense, especially when Kawhi was there last year, one of the best defenses of all time. I mean, it's one of the main reasons why they won the chip. They were so good defensively at every single point. Obviously, other reasons, the Warriors being hurt, Kawhi just going nuclear, those types of things obviously factor in, but their defense was historic last year. So Lonzo Ball going up against now a very good guard defenders in Kawhi, Kyle Lowry, and Fred VanVleet. Yeah, it's a little bit tough for Lonzo Ball in that sense, but we know what the guy can do. He's going to average a ton of assists. He's going to get rebounds in there. He will score as well. So there's triple-double upside in Lonzo Ball for sure on this team, and I think it's a team that will excel off of what his talents are as being sort of a pass-first ball handler. And I do like Lonzo Ball. Interested to see if they do pick and roll stuff with him in favors. Fred VanVleet at 4,800. I have a lot of interest in Toronto guys because I think they're all relatively underpriced. I like Siakam the most because of his ceiling. But Fred VanVleet's going to be out there. He's going to be running the 2 most likely. Now with no Danny Green, he's going to be running the 2. And he's going to be going up right next to Kyle Lowry at 4,800. Fred VanVleet, a guy who will score, a guy who will pick up assists, not too much of a rebounder, but I like that spot for him at the 2. Now, I would rather have him running the point, but he'll run the point for parts in this game when he's not out there with Lowry, so that's where upside comes from. Why do I care that he's running the point? Well, he's going to have more point guard responsibilities in terms of in the fast break, more assist opportunities, and more driving to the basket in the game, which leads just to more free throw attempts and obviously more fantasy points. Avery Bradley, 4,100, a terrible fantasy point per minute producer until last year in Memphis, where for like 2 weeks he just went nuclear for some reason. But he should be out there. I imagine he'll be like the primary number 2 guard for this Lakers team. $4,100 is too cheap for a guy who I'm projecting for around 30 minutes, right? That's a lot of minutes. It's not like he's effective, but volume for sometimes will trump your efficiency. If he's out there for 30 minutes and he does anything like he did last year, he could be valuable. But again, his point per minute production is going to be lower, I imagine, than it was last year. It was propped up by a very hot streak of 2 to 4 weeks, and now he's on a team where you have just absolute usage monsters in Anthony Davis and LeBron James. So 4,100 is interesting, but not somewhere I'm dying to get to. Same can be said for a guy like OG Anunoby. He's going to be more so involved in the offense with Kawhi Leonard out and not there anymore. He was a guy who was just battling injury all of last year. Not a very effective point per minute producer, a fantastic defender on this Toronto team. $3,900 if you get him for 32 minutes. It's very good. Again, this is a guy, though, that for 32 minutes can go out there and give you 16 fantasy points and not the 30-plus that you're really looking for to win a tournament. JaMychal Green, I think, is too cheap. I do think JaMychal Green plays between probably closer to 22 minutes, maybe 24 minutes, somewhere in those low to mid 20s is what I think JaMychal Green will get for the Clippers, especially with no Paul George there. You'll have JaMychal Green and Harrell at the 4, maybe shifting into some 5 minutes. $3,800. We saw JaMychal Green start to shoot the 3 a little bit better towards the end of last year. And apparently that's what he's been working on in the gym all off season. It's a nice price point. Jahlil Okafor is interesting at 3,200. Look, Jahlil Okafor is a guy who could play 5 minutes, 6 minutes, or he can play 20 minutes. Like, this is one of those players at the beginning of the year we have to watch. You're going to have Derek Favors probably playing the 5 in his past, especially in Utah. Played a little bit differently there, played at the 4, and he backed up Rudy Gobert at the 5 sometimes. But Derek Favors, if he's going to be playing his normal like 26 minutes, 24 minutes, well, now there's obviously center minutes to go around. 48 minutes have to be played at the position, so you get about 20 to 22 minutes going around for centers. Is it going to be Jahlil Okafor? They showed in the preseason that they're willing to put him there. He looked good in the preseason. He slimmed down. He looked very nimble. If it is at 3,200, he's a guy, if he ends up playing 22 minutes, he can get you 30 fantasy points, but also there's a really good chance, and maybe just as likely, if not more of a chance, that he goes out there and he plays 12 minutes and he gets you like 10 fantasy points. So obviously a risk at tournament play only. Kendrick Williams, I think he'll play in the mid-20s, low 20s. He's 3,100. This New Orleans team has just so much depth, even with Zion out. So much depth for guys to play minutes. So the Okafors and the Kendrick Williams are a little bit more risky. I think Williams is definitely more solidified somewhere in that low to mid 20s than a guy like Okafor, just because they have a couple more bigs that they can throw around. And Williams last year, as a cop comes by very rudely interrupting our first NBA pod. But Williams, he showed last year he could play the 2, he could play the 3, he could even play the 4. So I think he's just more versatile to get on the field. Again, early interest does not mean I'm going to play these players. It just means I want to look more into them. I have some interest. You can see guys on here that like Kawhi Leonard I don't put on here. So I want to look more into those things based on pricing. I have yet to build a lineup. These are just what's standing out. So hopefully this video helps. My projections will be on Patreon probably at the start of November. I'll throw them up there today for like the all sports package and the people who are already on there. And then I'll also have cash game tiers starting in November, at least 5 days a week. Hopefully up to 7 days a week. And then once NFL's over, come playoffs, when it's a lighter load and I'm not just doing NFL stuff nonstop and appearing on shows, I'll have a lot more time and it's going to be full on NBA. I'll be playing NBA. I cannot wait. NBA is my favorite DFS sport. In my opinion, it is the best DFS sport. NFL does not hold a candle to it. So thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you think about this video in the comments down below. Hit a subscribe button and also follow me on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. Check out my exclusive content over on Patreon down below. My name's Sal. You already know that. NBA is back. Let's go. Peace out, gang. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed that video. Above my head, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, I do ask you if you can please hit that subscribe button. Helps me out a good amount to reach more people. You can also follow me on Twitter. That's over there. Right in the corner is my at SalVetriDFS Twitter. And then above, you'll find my Patreon link. You can click on that if you want more exclusive content for me. Or a video is going to pop up, so why don't you check that one out as well. I think it's going to be beneficial for you. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.